What do you think of when you think of anarchism? Bombs, riots, destruction, disorder, assassinations? Many who watch too much cable news, people who think of terrorism when they think of Islam, people who are triggered by the word socialism, hold this misconception. But this attitude of dismissal or disgust with anarchist thought can infect even those who consider themselves educated and progressive. These people might think that all anarchism is a collection of people who want to overthrow the government tomorrow by any means necessary. What many don't realize is that anarchism is a blanket term covering a vast array of specific political theories. And while assassinations, bombs, and rioting are a part of its history, it's only a part. Anarchist writer Margaret Killjoy explains, quote, "Anarchism is a complex thing. It's an organic thing. It's an ideology against ideology. But it's still a specific and identifiable thing. Anarchism at its core is a belief in responsibility and freedom. Killjoy says that our current society is responsibility without freedom, while many misinterpret anarchism as freedom without responsibility. In reality, you must have both to be considered anarchist. Anarchism is anti-state, anti-capitalist, and anti-authoritarian. It champions mutual aid, free thought, and community. But within this framework exists the possibility for all different kinds of interpretations, all different means to achieve the ends of a truly free society. But as Ursula K. Le Guin says in The Dispossessed, quote, "The means are the end. Only peace brings peace. Only just acts bring justice." Thus, the variety of anarchism that Ursula K. Le Guin presents in The Dispossessed is decidedly pacifist. Le Guin explains in a preface to her short story, The Day Before Revolution, which takes place in the same universe as The Dispossessed, quote, "Odonianism is anarchism, not the bomb in the pocket stuff, which is terrorism, whatever name it tries to dignify itself with. Not the social Darwinist economic libertarianism of the far right, but anarchism, as prefigured by early Taoist thought and expounded by Shelley and Kropotkin, Goldman and Goodman. Anarchism's principal target is the authoritarian state, capitalist or socialist. Its principal moral, practical theme is cooperation, solidarity, mutual aid. It is the most idealistic and, to me, the most interesting of all political theories." To give you an idea of the early Taoist thought that Le Guin refers to here, here's a quote from Tao Te Ching. Quote, "The more laws and restrictions there are, the poorer people become. The sharper men's weapons, the more trouble in the land. The more ingenious and clever people are, the more strange things happen. The more rules and regulations, the more thieves and robbers. Therefore, the wise one says, I take no action and people behave themselves. I enjoy peace and people become honest. I do nothing and people become rich. I have no desires and people return to the good and simple life." The Dispossessed is an examination of anarchism, flaws and all. But it's also about much more than that. It's about the power of ideas, the breaking down of psychological and societal walls, and the truth hidden beneath layers of wrapping paper. It's about property, possession, violence, oppression. Wow, that rhymes. The human spirit, creativity, individuality, rebellion, and home. It posits that freedom means constant revolution, not only against unjust systems, but against one's own rigid thought. It shows that even in a free society, one must question everything, but that through a life of simplicity and selflessness, one can be whole. Simply put, The Dispossessed is a masterpiece, and I'm not throwing that word around lightly. So I hope you'll join me as I dissect what it means to me and why it's my favorite book of all time. Understanding and being open to all things, are you able to do nothing? Giving birth and nourishing, bearing yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit, leading yet not dominating. This is the primal virtue. When my friend read The Dispossessed per my recommendation, he sent me a text saying, I thought the wall would be more important. The wall that he refers to encloses the port of Annares, which is the only point of contact that the anarchist world, Annares, has with Urras, the planet from which they fled after a successful revolution. The two worlds are diametric in almost every way. Annares has no government, no property, is harsh, barren, and ugly, but with beautiful faces. Urras is a world of states, war, corruption, poverty, inequality, opulence. It is beautiful and splendid, but with ugly faces. I laughed when seeing this text about the wall, because I actually had the same thought during my first read of The Dispossessed, after Guin spends the first several pages hyping up this wall. But a decision as obvious as this is always intentional. So on my second read through, this most recent time, I kept an eye out for what this wall is all about. And what I found was that walls are repeatedly used as one of the most important symbols in the book. They represent separation, yes, but also our own rigid thought patterns. As for separation, it's pretty clear, so I won't spend too much time on it. The wall acts as a boundary that separates Urras and Annares ever since the successful Odonian Revolution 7 generations ago. That was what was mentioned in the short story that I brought up earlier. But there are also walls within Shevek, the protagonist's mind, walls that he must demolish over the course of the story. There are walls that the Anaresti have built around themselves, around their thought, walls of xenophobia and fear, walls of social pressure and conformity and repression of individuality, walls around their very idea of anarchism. Because the Odonian society, when properly functioning, is itself a revolution, a permanent one, an ongoing process. Odo, the philosophical leader of the anarchist revolution that founded Annares, said that, quote, "Human solidarity is our one hope." But as a side character Bidop points out, quote, "We've betrayed that hope. We've let cooperation become obedience. On Urras, they have government by the minority. Here we have government by the majority, but it is government." The Dispossessed follows two timelines, one on Annares and one on Urras. Shevek, a brilliant physicist, has gone to Urras as a rebel against his own revolution. On Annares, Shevek's ideas have been suppressed. His papers have been rejected despite their genius, and he has become an outcast. The Annares storyline follows Shevek coming to terms with the truth that, quote, "There is an unadmitted, inadmissible government that rules Odonian society by stifling the individual mind." And so he revolts. He becomes a true anarchist in an anarchy that has lost its way. His quote-unquote boss, Sabul, quote, "who gets his power from the innate cowardice of the average human mind, public opinion," is one wall that Shevek must break down. But for 4 years, Shevek gives in to the pressure to conform and accepts work postings that not only separate him from his life partner Takver, but certainly don't fit his talents. Over the course of the novel, Shevek slowly realizes that his friend Bidop was right when he said, quote, "It's always easier not to think for oneself. Find a nice safe hierarchy and settle in. Don't make changes. Don't risk disapproval. Don't upset your syndics. It's always easiest to let yourself be governed." Shevek also realizes that he is in fact doing a disservice to his society by not following his individual creativity and the work he feels called to do. He knows the truth that, quote, "The duty of the individual is to accept no rule, to be an initiator of his own acts, to be responsible. We are not subjects of a state founded upon law, but members of a society founded upon revolution. The revolution is in the individual spirit, or it is nowhere. It is for all, or it is for nothing. If it is seen as having any end, it will never truly begin." Shevek was a prisoner behind walls of his own making, but when he embraces his individual choice and free will, that is his right as an anarchist, he discovers true freedom. But he doesn't find this freedom simply by leaving Annares to go work on his physics on Urras. No, true voyage is return, and it's only upon his return that he finds his eventual peace and tranquility. All right, real quick, just before we continue with the rest of the video, wanted to thank everybody for watching. I hope you're enjoying it so far. If you like what you see and want to see more, click that subscribe button. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Dispossessed in the comments. I worked quite a bit on this video. It took a long time, so I really appreciate everybody who's watching. Leave a like, leave a comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. That's all I got for the moment. Thank you again, and let's get into the rest of the video. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all, and the earth itself to nobody. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In the Urras storyline, we find Shevek discovering and navigating a confusing and backwards world. To his eyes, one of needless opulence, waste, promiscuity, and possession. Everything on Urras is, quote, either useless to begin with, or ornamented so as to disguise its use. Acres of luxuries, acres of excrement. Urras feels entirely unreal to Shevek. The grand apartment they put him up in, the speeches he gives, which Shevek feels have fallen on deaf ears, the parties he goes to where he sees the same faces over and over again, the courses he teaches, the physicists he works with. Everyone he interacts with seems to be living a life of blissful ignorance, content growing fat off the planet's excess and waste.
To Murray Bookchin, the thing the Western world produces the most of, he says, is trash. Courtesy, he says, of, again, this constant imperative towards growth. You know, once people have been properly sedated by consumer culture, buying all kinds of stuff to make them temporarily feel good, well, we need people to keep buying stuff to keep the economy going. We just can't have people stop buying stuff, guys. What are you doing? So to Bookchin, what you get are things like planned obsolescence. You buy a phone, and in a few years, whether you've taken good care of it or not, the mandatory software update makes your phone practically unusable. It's so annoying, people end up spending $500 on another one just to get on with their life. A typical house today is built out of materials and with construction that maybe is going to last a few decades before it needs some major repairs. Maybe 100 years before it needs to be totally replaced. Again, the economy needs to keep going under capitalism. But what if? I mean, imagine if we built things that were designed to last a really long time, like far beyond your lifetime kind of long. Something like a Gothic cathedral that's built to last thousands of years. Something like a good cast iron pan. The only sort of world where people would see this kind of longevity as a bad thing is in a world where things need to be constantly harvested, used up, spent, and then sent off to a landfill so that people can keep buying the next thing made out of the organic, natural world.
Shevek feels that even he had been carefully packaged, like the layers and layers of wrapping paper, plastic, and boxes in which the Urrasti package everything. Shevek knows that there is truth beneath the wrapping paper that he is not allowed to see, but he doesn't know how to find it. He feels terribly alone, quote, because he came from a self-exiled society. He had always been alone on his own world because he had exiled himself from his society. The settlers had taken one step away. He had taken two. He stood by himself because he had taken the metaphysical risk. Shevek comes to realize that his goal of uniting the two worlds is impossible, and especially for him, as he feels he does not belong in either world. Bedop says early in the story that in a sick organism, even a healthy cell is doomed. Shevek's journey on Urras is one of a healthy cell in a sick organism. He is ignored or repressed when he tries to discuss his opinions on gender roles, anarchism, war, profit, status, but he soon realizes that the repression of these ideas cannot kill them. Quote, "The idea is like grass. It craves light, likes crowds, thrives on crossbreeding, grows better for being stepped on." Herein lies a key theme in both storylines, the enduring power of ideas. Shevek represents an idea. He is a living, breathing example of a better, more just way to live for the oppressed Urrasti. Eventually, Shevek realizes that the physics he is doing, his theory of simultaneity, cannot fall into the hands of the Urrasti elite. They will use it to wage war and conquer. On Urras, to be a physicist is to serve the state. Not society, not mankind, not truth. And despite Shevek's best intentions, an individual cannot bargain with the state. No, the idea must be shared, given as a gift to all planets. It is upon this realization that the final wall breaks down within Shevek's mind, and at last he solves his theory of simultaneity. Quote, "For at this instant, the difference between this planet and that one, between Urras and Annares, was no more significant to him than the difference between 2 grains of sand on the shore of the sea. There were no more abysses, no more walls, there was no more exile. He had seen the foundations of the universe, and they were solid." This is the moment when Shevek enacts his final act of rebellion, to run away from the Urrasti politicians and elites, to find the truth hiding beneath the wrapping paper. He becomes the very embodiment of revolt, and in this he finds true freedom. To make a long story short, in the climax, Shevek finds the underground rebellion and participates in a rally which is violently oppressed. Eventually, he's forced to take asylum in the Terran embassy. Terra, by the way, is just Earth in this universe, in the distant future. He meets another character there whose name is Ambassador Kang, and they have a conversation in which Shevek essentially sums up his newfound wisdom after his lengthy journey. He explains to Ambassador Kang that he was wrong when he thought to bridge the gap between worlds. Quote, "Because there is nothing on Urras that we Anaresti need. We left with open, empty hands 170 years ago, and we were right. We took nothing because there is nothing here but the states and their weapons, the rich in their lies, the poor in their misery. There is no way to act rightly with a clear heart on Urras. There is nothing you can do that profit does not enter into, and fear of loss, and the wish for power. You cannot say good morning without knowing which of you is superior to the other, or trying to prove it. You cannot act like a brother to other people. You must manipulate them, or command them, or obey them, or trick them. You cannot touch another person, yet they will not leave you alone. There is no freedom. It is a box. Urras is a box, a package, with all the beautiful wrapping of blue sky and meadows and forests and great cities. And you open the box, and what is inside it? A black cellar full of dust and a dead man. A man whose hand was shot off because he held it out to others. I have been to hell at last. Desar was right. It is Urras. Hell is Urras." Damn. Did anyone else just get chills? Because I did, even just reading it for like the 4th time. Yield and overcome, bend and be straight, empty and be full, wear out and be new, have little and gain, have much and be confused. When asked how anarchism relates to her life, Ursula K. Le Guin replied, quote, "Only as freedom of the mind, of the imagination, the same freedom that reading Lao Tzu gave me many years earlier." I think that Le Guin recognizes that this anarchist utopia that she created in The Dispossessed is not really achievable in our current world. It's why she made Annares a completely separate planet rather than another society within a state of worlds. Despite its theoretical virtues, any experiment in anarchism has unfortunately failed here on our measly Earth. Victor Urbanowitz explains in Personal and Political in The Dispossessed, quote, "In the 20th century, both authoritarian communists and the bourgeois democratic nations have proven quite willing to tolerate, if not actually bring about, the obliteration of actual libertarian communist societies. No Western power intervened to protect the Ukrainian peasant communes, which were consciously anarchist and anti-Bolshevik, from domination by Moscow in 1920, though White Russian reactionaries received U.S. aid. The fact is, we live in a world of states, powerful states with weapons large and small, and an anarchist society anywhere is a threat to the status quo. There is no habitable moon, no Annares that we can move to sever ourselves from the states and their power. And I've yet to hear a really good argument for how an actual anarchist society could succeed in defending itself from these world powers. But I don't want to give you the wrong idea and think that I am disavowing anarchism here. I think that its value really is as a moral and ethical philosophy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau said that the moment property and civilization began is irreversible, and I'm inclined to agree with him there. He says that we can never return to the so-called state of nature because civilization and the march of progress would never allow it. When Guin called anarchism the most idealistic and to her the most interesting of all political theories, I believe that she recognized this truth. As such, my main takeaway from The Dispossessed is not that an anarchist revolution tomorrow will solve all the world's problems, at least not in the traditional definition of revolution. By the way, this is a relatively common interpretation of anarchism. Murray Bookchin, for instance, believes that it's better to start at the small scale, the individual even, than expand to the family, then the community, and eventually reach a place where anarchist values of solidarity, freedom, responsibility are reflected throughout the society, and we can slowly chip away at the unnecessary hierarchies that seem to dominate our society.
See, one small step at a time is okay to a lot of revolutionary thinkers. In fact, dare I say, to most revolutionary thinkers at this point, incremental progress may actually be the only way. Nobody here's talking about some violent, bloody revolution that takes place overnight. There's good reason to believe that when it comes to anarchism, nothing even remotely like that could ever work in the real world for many of the same reasons that Marxist revolutions have failed in the past. That you can't just take people that from the moment they're born are conditioned to see their whole life through the lens of being a worker and consumer, alienated labor at a company by day, Netflix at night to ease the pain. You can't take people from a culture that's like that, start a revolution one day, transplant them into a society where their life is completely different, and then expect them to be a functional, happy person on the other side of it. Again, revolution to many thinkers needs to be done slowly, because the only way you ever bring about these sorts of ideas in a way that's enduring is if the sensibility of the society changes to the point that a different structure is demanded from within.
Rather, I think its moral and political philosophy present a fulfilling ideology that rejects ideology to live by. Its foundations are of Taoist philosophy that presents simple living and renouncement of profit and ambition as its core tenets. And you don't need to be an anarchist revolutionary to live by its values of community, mutual aid, cooperation, free thought, responsibility, shedding of desire, and anti-authoritarianism. You can still rebel against injustice and rebel against your own rigid thought without expecting to live in a utopia. Revolution. A fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something. A change of paradigm. When I say that freedom is constant revolution, my meaning is twofold. First, revolution against unjust systems. This is the revolution that we see in the Syndicate of Initiative, Revolutionaries Among Revolutionaries on Annares, and in Shevek, a bastion of hope and purpose for the oppressed Urrasti. Second, and more importantly, I refer to Shevek's revolution within his own mind. Albert Camus famously said in The Rebel, "Become so very free that your whole existence is an act of rebellion." For me, this is the profound takeaway from Shevek's character. For much of the book, he is not truly free. Walls within his own mind prevent him from expressing his individuality. But as he realizes, quote, "The Odonian society was conceived as a revolution, and revolution begins in the thinking mind. He was therefore certain by now that his radical and unqualified will to create was, in Odonian terms, its own justification. His sense of primary responsibility towards his work did not cut him off from his fellows, from his society, as he had thought. It engaged with them absolutely. Chevèque makes a few key decisions in his revolution. He founds the Syndicate of Initiative, quote, to shake things up, to break some bad habits, to make people ask questions, to behave like anarchists. He goes to Urras for the same reasons, because his society won't allow him the freedom and agency needed to do his work. By traveling to Urras, he realizes that he was mistaken in his quest to unite the planets. They must be the ones to initiate contact, not Annares. But that doesn't mean his time was wasted. Just like the train driver said, one must work with time and not against it. This time counts in the same way that Chevèque and Tocqueville's 4-year separation counts. No, he was never going to change the politicians and the elites, but he did something much more profound. He showed the working class, the oppressed, the downtrodden, that there is hope in the future, and that there exists a metaphysical and spiritual freedom in revolution. Greater still was his impact on his own society. He left Annares disillusioned by the rigid bureaucracy beginning to form, by the rule of the majority. The revolutionaries had lost their way, blind to the fact that they were being lied to by themselves. Chevèque's revolution awakened the Anaresti to the simple fact that any rule is tyranny, and indeed they were being ruled by the majority, by social pressure to conform. He took his life and his individual will into his hands by boarding the ship to Urras, and when he returned, he found that his number of supporters had grown. He was still considered a traitor to some, but it doesn't really matter. He had proven to himself and to his society the duty and right of the individual to follow what they know is best for the greater good. Quote, change is freedom, change is life. Le Guin, in so many words, is encouraging the reader to change with the dispossessed. And indeed, this is a life-changing book for me in every sense of the word. It's one of those rare books that fundamentally altered who I am as a person, as a citizen of Earth, as a being in time. It is science fiction at its most profound, storytelling at its most precise, and characterization at its most real. It is ambiguous yet cohesive, elaborate yet simple, lively yet still, intimate yet vast. It is all of these things and so much more that make it my greatest book of all time. This rock is so uncomfortable. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I had a lot to say. And I feel like I say this with every book I review, but I barely scratched the surface, I feel like. You could do a whole interpretation of The Dispossessed with the Taoism lens, and who knows, maybe I'll do that in the future. If you stuck around to the end, congratulations. You get this ribbon, which says something. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, whatever you want. Tell a friend. Let me know what you thought of The Dispossessed, of this review. Am I full of shit? I gotta take a shit. Jesus Christ. Okay, it's like 6 a.m. or something, so I'm getting a little loopy, and I'm gonna go. Also, the sun is shining directly in my face. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace and love, and I'll see you next time.